What my hope is that now that we have this scientific information and this has been demonstrated clearly, that it's taken seriously.
Tonight, new research finds the mercury contamination in the English Wabigoon River near the Grassy Narrows First Nation is getting worse.
It has been challenging, of course, to find ways to unite Métis people during this time.
Cassidy Caron, president of the Metis National Council, will not seek re-election.
Well, it's going to be sad if we lose the sheep on these mountains, right?
And the Kluane First Nation is asking for help to protect the Dall sheep in the Yukon. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. New research from the University of Western Ontario has found that wastewater from the Dryden paper mill is intensifying mercury contamination in Ontario's English Wabigoon River. The research team detected heightened levels of methylmercury, the most toxic form of mercury in sediment, water, and fish. While the paper mill stopped using mercury in 1975, members of the nearby Grassy Narrows First Nation continue to face significant health issues. Over 90% of the community's population displays symptoms of mercury poisoning. Researcher Dr. Brian Branfiron hopes the findings will encourage regulating bodies, which include the Ontario government, to take action.
What my hope is that now that we have this scientific information and this has been demonstrated clearly, that it's taken seriously, and there's no question in my mind that these discharges are worsening the mercury problem in the river currently, and it's not a solution to the whole problem because the mercury levels in the river are still exceptionally high, and that needs to be cleaned up too. But if we turn down the heat on the process that's forming methylmercury, then we can bring down mercury levels in fish relatively quickly.
The Cson sisters made headlines in 2023 when they were granted bail after spending 30 years in custody for a second-degree murder conviction in 1994. Now, recently, one of the sisters has gone back into custody. Following the breach of 2 bail conditions, Narissa Cson has been remanded into custody. She's currently in Pine Grove Correctional Center. Sisters Narissa and Odelia were arrested in 1993 for the death of a farmer in Kamsack. Prior to being released on bail in 2023, Narissa and Odelia both previously had day parole revoked due to drug violations and failure to report to parole officers. Congress of Aboriginal Peoples National Vice Chief Kim Bowden says the system is set up for those released to fail.
She does not need to go back to prison. She needs programming. She needs to go to a treatment center, a healing lodge.
To Ottawa now, where the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans presented a report to the House of Commons today that in part has called for the elver fishery to immediately reopen. Fisheries Minister Diane Lebout-Hillier canceled the 2024 elver harvesting season, claiming concerns over safety and conservation. Meanwhile, Mi'kmaq Senator Paul Prosper is still waiting for a third-party independent review of the actions of fisheries officers. It's been a month since he called for the review into the actions of the officers back in March when they left 2 Mi'kmaq fishers who were harvesting elvers, or baby eels, stranded without shoes hours from home. And in another incident, a Mi'kmaq person was pulled over in a parking lot on suspicion of transporting elvers and subsequently maced. Prosper says fishery officers must be held accountable.
In order to proceed forward, there's a need to have a keen understanding of the underlying facts, and something that you can only get through an appropriate independent investigation. I think it's the independent aspect of the investigation, I think, is quite key. you essentially don't want DFO to investigate itself. And
the president of the Metis National Council says she will not be seeking re-election. Cassidy Caron made the announcement at a press conference in Ottawa on Thursday afternoon. After 3 years in the position, she says it's time to move on. Caron also says she is pregnant and wanted to make the announcement early enough to give potential candidates time to step forward. An election for MNC president will be held on September 26th of this year in Saskatoon. Caron says the current controversy over Bill C-53 did not play into her decision not to seek re-election.
As many people will know, the Metis Nation has been fighting for generations, amongst themselves with the Government of Canada. We are a fighting people. It has been challenging, of course, to find ways to unite Métis people during this time. However, I'm proud of the work that we've done to unite our Métis governments, to unite a lot of Métis people through, stories and events that have taken place in the last 3 years.
Still in Ottawa, the Conservatives are attacking the Liberal government during question period today over affordability. It comes after Food Banks Canada released its poverty report cards yesterday, showing the high cost of living and housing are pushing more people below the poverty line.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the homelessness and hunger. He doubled the debt, increased taxes and caused inflation, but said it was all to fund generous programs that would end homelessness. Well, homelessness is now up 38%, and a quarter of Canadians are skipping meals because they can't afford them. That's because his greedy government is consuming everything Canadians earn. Why is the NDP and Liberals forcing Canadians to feed this morbidly obese government instead of feeding their families?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from the Conservatives who purport to care about poverty and Canadians when every single time they vote against those supports, $10 a day childcare, early learning and childhood education, they're not supporting our budgetary measures to put food in school lunch boxes for 400,000 children, Mr. Speaker. It's unbelievable that they will at one hand say they support Canadians and on the other hand vote against those supports every single time. Thank you, Mr.
Food Banks Canada says 1 in 10 Canadians now live in poverty, up substantially from a few years ago. In a Yellowknife Supreme Courthouse comes breaking news now. The sentencing in the murder of 22-year-old Dene woman Breanna Menacho. Family and friends of the 22-year-old openly wept in court today, mourning the loss of a beautiful soul. Justice David Gates said the 11 victim impact statements had a profound impact on the court and showed even though 4 years has passed, there's still a deep sense of sadness. Ultimately, the pre-sentence report showing Gladue factors played heavily into the sentencing hearing of Devon Larrabee, who admitted to murdering Menacho in 2020. The judge told Larrabee he had done a terrible, terrible thing and would have to live with it for the rest of his life.
The murder of Breanna Menacho was a great tragedy. Its circumstances are violent and shocking. Today, the court handed down a life sentence with no parole eligibility for 10 years. This was the recommendation of the parties. In our view, this was a fit and fair outcome.
Time to step aside for a quick break. Still to come, our Truth in Politics panel weighs in on the RCMP's edition of the ribbon skirt to its ceremonial uniform. Stick around. Welcome back. For thousands of years, First Nations people in the Yukon's Kluane region have hunted Dall sheep for food and other necessities. But in recent decades, their populations have been in decline. Now the Kluane First Nation is calling on Yukon to help provide greater protections for the sheep in order to help them rebound and hopefully bounce back in greater numbers. Sarah Connors has more.
This is Sheep Mountain, also known as Thachel Dall, in Kluane National Park in southwestern Yukon. The mountain is part of the Dall sheep's range, which are the only wild white sheep in the world.
And there is a lot of sheep just by these. You see that mountain right there? It's kind of like got a flat top. I mean, it's called Flat Top Mountain. There's sheep there. There's sheep all over here. So
Chief Bob Dixon of the Kluane First Nation says his people have a special connection with the sheep.
Part of our history, sheep, our people have used sheep for tools, for clothing, and for, making utensils and all that from the horns and stuff.
It's a relationship that's still highly honored today.
We fought in our final agreements to make sure that we were probably the only First Nation that has sheep in our final agreement as a allocation. And it was because our people told us sheep is that important to us.
But there aren't as many sheep in the Kluane region as there used to be. A 2023 government survey shows in some sheep management units in the Kluane region, Dall sheep have declined by 49 to 63% compared to previous surveys from 2011 to 2016. One management area has as few as 30 non-lamb Dall sheep, compared to 83 counted in 2015. Researchers believe things like predation and environmental factors such as deep snowpacks and late springs are impacting their survival.
Well, it's going to be sad if we lose the sheep on these mountains, right?
The First Nation co-manages sheep populations with Yukon government and other partners. Last year, it asked the government for emergency hunting closures of areas where sheep numbers are low. But Dixon says they couldn't come to a solution. Now, the First Nation is asking for closures a second time.
We expect, the governments to take it seriously and react in a timely manner, right?
The Department of Environment declined to do an interview with APTN News at this time, but a spokesperson said in a statement, the government of Yukon is considering management options for sheep in the area with the feedback we've received from wildlife co-managers, and we will provide more information ahead of the start of hunting season. It also said it's working with its co-managers on a memorandum of understanding to express consensus on conservation status and management options for these sheep populations. Parks Canada is also taking measures to help Dall sheep numbers recover within the national park, such as asking hikers not to visit Sheep Mountain during lambing season. Dixon is hopeful his people's beloved sheep will one day rebound.
We can't really control much of the climate, but we can certainly do our best, right?
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Burwash Landing.
A move by the RCMP to demonstrate its, quote, values of reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion seems to have backfired. On Wednesday, the RCMP announced the addition of the RCMP ribbon skirt to the ceremonial uniform. But the reaction from Indigenous peoples was so swift and fierce, the RCMP turned off the comment sections on social media. Our Truth and Politics panel is here to discuss. Jennifer Lewitz is a policy analyst with War Shield, and Nigon Sinclair is a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Nigon, Jennifer, thanks for being with us this week. Nigon, what are your thoughts on the RCMP's announcement of the addition of the RCMP ribbon skirt to the ceremonial uniform?
It's, I don't know who's running the comms over there, the communications department over there, but it's certainly ill-timed with a trial going on amongst the tremendous attention that's being paid to trauma that Indigenous peoples have experienced over a long history. And on top of that, the RCMP have been the perpetrators of much of that trauma, a great deal of that trauma, not at all, but a great deal of it. And it's almost putting reconciliation before truth. There's been very little responsibility that's been taken for the harm that RCMP officers and the institution itself has harmed since going all the way back to the first steps of Confederation. And so while I appreciate they want to participate in the kind of reconciliation regalia that different industries and institutions have been using, especially this time of year when graduations are taking place, and important days of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and for so on. Those it's just premature at the very minimum. It's just really an ill-timed, poorly thought out event, and poorly thought out because it's not, taking our sacred items like an eagle staff and a ribbon dress and then just simply doing that without asking permission or talking to communities really reeks of a lot of appropriation.
It looks like from the photo, too, they couldn't even get an Indigenous person in the photo. Jennifer, your take on all of this?
Yeah, that representation not existing in the photo is a huge problem because why not? I've been trying to figure out what's going on behind the scenes with this entire issue, and I am hearing that they did consult with some of their own Indigenous officers within the force, which is fine. I respect the people that, put their lives on the line, and if there's Indigenous officers in the force, that's completely okay. But at the same time, I echo what Nigon said. I worry about the consultation that was done for this, and not just consultation with officers, but our knowledge keepers and our elders, because my mind immediately goes to residential school survivors and their families that still carry that trauma with that relationship with the RCMP. And, we're hearing reports that the RCMP is still failing Indigenous people across the country, especially in their treatment of unhoused Indigenous women in the Northwest Territories. So exactly, you can't participate in reconciliation without acknowledging the truth first. We're still seeing the TRC calls to actions not be completed. So what is the end goal here?
Nigon, as mentioned, the RCMP turned off the comments on the social media posts, but of course people were still sharing them and able to comment that way. I've yet to see any positive comments. Have you, and what do you make of turning the comments off on what should have been or what they must have assumed was a good news announcement?
I don't know who is over there thinking about communications and how this looks, but clearly they have no ability to understand how the community would have responded to this. This absolutely would not be something that the community would be seeking to do without, at least at very bare minimum, some kind of partnership with an Indigenous organization, maybe a group of elders or someone outside of the RCMP in Indigenous communities who would perhaps be working with or standing alongside, or at the very minimum recognizing that this would be an act that would receive consent from Indigenous elders, from knowledge keepers, from those who have been harmed. I mean, Jennifer's right. The wounds are very deep when it comes to the RCMP, and the fact that the RCMP won't take responsibility or won't make some kind of moment of gesture or recognition for the harms that they have participated in, maybe in small scales over events here and there, but certainly have not on a broad scale participated in much of the instances just by residential schools alone. And so to do this act is just really tone deaf, and it really isn't something that I think people are going to be feeling very favorable about. And until such time, I don't see this as something that I would want to wear, even if I am an Indigenous officer.
Jennifer, is there anything the RCMP can do to demonstrate its, quote, values of reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, they can make sure that they're not actively, how do I say this? When we still see reports, like we're seeing from the Northwest Territories that was just put out in the Canadian press by Alessia Pacifume last month, saying, if you read that report about unhoused Indigenous women being mistreated by RCMP officers, in that report it alleges that either all of those women have been mistreated or know someone that has. So what are we doing to actively make sure that we're not even rebuilding, but building the trust initially with the RCMP and law enforcement across the country? But to me, yeah, this just seems performative at best and almost borderline insulting as well, because it's like, oh, well, this is just a step in the right direction while we continue to actively not make the problem any better.
Jennifer Negon, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you as always. Thanks for being back this week.
Yeah, miigwech, thanks.
We'd like to hear what you think about the RCMP's move to include the ribbon skirt as part of its ceremonial uniform, or anything else you'd like to reach out about. Here's how to continue the conversation. If you have a story you want to share, send us an email to news@aptn.ca. To read and watch our stories, you can head over to our website. That's aptnnews.ca. You can also find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. We have a preview of tonight's episode of Nation to Nation coming up after the break. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. Another beautiful close to the day. Jenna Presley captured this moment at MacArthur Falls, located in southeastern Manitoba. Thanks for that, Jenna. You can send your photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at your Friday weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, cloudy and 23 for Halifax, showers and 26 in Fredericton, 9 in Kuujjuaq, 2 above in Nain. Sun's out and 21 for Montreal, showers and 14 in Val-d'Or. A sunny high of 20 in Sault Ste. Marie, 18 in North Bay. 11 in Thunder Bay, rain and 13 for Sioux Lookout. Cloudy and 10 for Thompson and God's Lake. 8 with showers in Winnipeg, 5 and rain in Dauphin. 14 with rain in Regina, showers and 13 in Saskatoon. 11 in Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, 21 in High Level, 15 for Fort Chipewyan. 15 in Edmonton, showers and 18 in Lethbridge. 15 with rain in Vancouver, showers and 19 in Kamloops. 15 with rain for Prince George, showers and 13 in Smithers. Plus 1 with snow in Old Crow, 16 above in Whitehorse. A sunny high of 18 in Yellowknife, 25 in Wrigley. Plus 2 in Sax Harbor, 3 above in Paulatuck. 6 in Chesterfield and Whale Cove. Minus 3 with snow in Resolute, 2 below with flurries in Arctic Bay. Over to our Ottawa studio now, where Annette Francis is standing by to tell us what's coming up on Nation to Nation.
Coming up on Nation to Nation, we'll talk to Green Party leader Elizabeth May about a bill she introduced a year ago to combat environmental racism. And Senator Kim Pate joins us to discuss Bill S-212, which is in third reading at the Senate. It proposes to create automatic expiries of criminal records. We'll also talk to Hill Times columnist Rose LeMay about identity fraud and more. That's after the news on Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Annette. You can watch Nation to Nation, the second last episode of the season, right here in less than 2 minutes' time. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News. Be sure to join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your early edition of the National News. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy McGuitch, thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Go Oilers. Have a good night.